That's the kind of thinking that they have in Washington. That's what's happening with BP.
Absolutely what's happening with BP. The idea is that if government regulates it, then it must be okay. And then when something goes wrong, what's the response of government right now?
Freedom has failed.
It has to, well, freedom's failed, and you have to fix it. They have no clue how to fix it. They have no clue what it would require to fix it, the kind of mental effort, the kind of integration, the kind of reason required to fix the problem that BP is creating. Just fix it, because to them, knowledge is insignificant. You know, actual work out there in reality is insignificant. They just want their emotions and their thoughts to just come to reality like that. They're complete whim worshippers.
I think it gets down to they will do whatever they have to do to keep their job, to stay elected, to get reelected, for their party to stay in power, for their party to get back into power, and they make a lot of deals with their own conscience. I'll say this now so I can get reelected, and then I'll fix Social Security, or then I'll do X, Y, and Z. And it just keeps working against themselves. And now they've dug themselves such a hole that it's not going to work. People, you know, they always ask, why do these books work? Well, my heroes are the men and women in the military, CIA, FBI, stuff like that, and the villains are terrorists and politicians.
But you know what? I think it goes further than that, because, I mean, quite honestly, I mean, if I were here, I'd say, okay, it's like Tom Clancy. I don't need to know exactly how the rail system works. There's a lot in here, but what happens in this is what's missing in society: common sense. But it's common sense. Back in just a second. Sorry. Since it's crazy, yeah, it's only Rudyard Kipling. Rudyard Kipling wrote that, who had seen what the world was headed towards and said, nothing makes sense. And when we went into the break, we were talking with Yarn Brook about Ayn Rand, and also Vince Flynn is here. He's the author of Term Limits. We're talking a little bit about fiction and how it can happen if you look at the correct data points. We were talking about what Ayn Rand said and what your characters say, and what happens, I think, in the Overton window is it's common sense. But you said, no, not exactly.
Yeah, it's ideas. It's common sense at a certain level, but it's much deeper than that. This is, particularly Atlas Shrugged, is about fundamental, foundational ideas. Even the point you made early on the show. You said things are connected, and it's important to connect them. We call that integration, integrating. It's how the human mind works. But when you teach our kids not to integrate, not to think, not to generalize, not to see connections, then you're destroying human beings' capacity to think. And what you find in Atlas Shrugged is intellectuals telling people around them, don't think. Reality doesn't exist. Everything's subjective. There are no connections. And that's what leads to statism. That's what leads to an American public who can't think and therefore elects these wicked people to Congress, and they create the mess that we're in today.
Let me go. Your name is Kelly? Yes. Hi, Kelly. Go ahead.
Don't you think that part of what happened with BP and the Deepwater Horizon was due to a lack of imagination? In their failure analysis prior to beginning drilling the well, they failed to simply foresee, to imagine the sequence of events that occurred and caused the tragedy.
I think that kind of comes from, imagination is the same thing with ideas, that you do kind of, you shut down thinking, and you have the same kind of thing with too big to fail. you have all of these rules, these regulations, and so nothing's going to fail. Before, when the stock market was at 14,000, I think he used to be on my show in the day. It was at 14,000, and I remember I had a guy on it was like the last day of the high, and I said, I remember looking in the camera saying, "Good God, America, get out of the stock market." And this guy was making fun of me. And he's like, "Glenn, you don't know." And you hear it all the time. People say, "Well, you don't understand this system, that system. It's all..."
But look, I don't want to let the government off on the BP thing, because what has the government done? How did BP get to drill in mild, deep water? They're not allowed to drill in the continental shelf where the oil is easily available, and when there's a spill, you can easily...
Or in Montana, where you can have it above water.
They're sent off to a mile deep, and then they're giving a liability cap, too big to fail. You're only liable for $75 million. Oh, that's easy. I can take on risk if that's all I got to suffer. So the government creates these scenarios exactly as they're described in Atlas, where businessmen do things, something bad happens, they're going to be blamed for it.
Back in a minute. Wow, you are right. Seriously, I'm just sitting here with Vince Flynn, author of Term Limits, and Yaron Brook. He is the president of the Ayn Rand Institute. And I just saw that robot playing the violin. I went, there's something seriously wrong with the Japanese. And there is. I don't know. I mean, what's with the robots? Give it up, man. Take your wife out on a date. I don't know what you're doing over there. Keith, in the audience, you have a thought.
Yeah, these self-appointed intellectuals in Congress that we call the progressives of both houses think we're stupid. And they're on a spending spree that is unstoppable. Even the New York Times, the not conservative Times, said a year ago, November, that our national debt will be $24 trillion in 9 to 10 years. So they're on a drunken spending spree, just like a drunk or a druggie that has a credit card, unlimited, that he has no responsibility or belief that he'll ever have to pay anything. They're acting just like that, and they're stealing from us, our children, and our grandchildren. So I think the only solution to save our nation from these kamikaze-style deficit spenders is term limits. To get politicians, to get rid of the career politicians.
Hang on just a second, Keith, because Vince Flynn just said, which kind, not something that you want to say.
Yeah, no, violence
to Vince Flynn.
No, violence is not. One of the things in the book that I point out is once the violence starts,
term limits. It's
unpredictable where it will lead to.
Yeah.
We talked about that on the radio today.
You know, this is the one thing that that everybody says, you know, oh, Glenn Beck, because I have my book out today, and Glenn Beck, they actually said that, you know, that's going to be found in, you know, lunch buckets of killers. You become the French Revolution. Violence is the worst place we could possibly go. We have to wrap it up. Back in a second. Got a great job. I want to thank you so much for watching tonight. I have to have these guys back because restoration is the key. Just learning what we're supposed to have known as citizens. We'll see you again tomorrow night from New York. Good night, America.